Tov, today's Daf Yomi is Nazir Daf Lamed Ches, Nazir 38, and we're going to start on 37b, around 4 lines from the bottom. So Rabbi Akiva says that what we're discussing, the Rabbi Akiva says that by Nazir we say this concept that heter is mitzdaref for Isser, that if something that's permitted combines with something that's prohibited to make the requisite shear, the requisite amount for sinful liability. So Amarle Rav Ashi Rav Kahana. So if that's the case, a heter mitzdaref Easter by Nazir. So Rav Ashi says to Rav Kahana, we're now talking about the last generation of the Gemara. The Gemara is really trying to pull it all together. How could Rabbi Akiva say that when we have a brisa? Oh, Hadatanya Mikol Asher Yeyasem Migefenayim. Every that a Nazir has liability. Verse says from everything that comes from the grapevine, and the Brisa says, "We made always suri Nazir shemet star from Zamzeh." Doesn't this teach us that when it comes to the prohibitions of the Nazir, that they combine with each other to make the required amount? So if you eat an olive-sized amount of the wine and the grape itself, then you're going to have the violation of the prohibition. Now, so Gemara says, so Rabbi, she says, well, Rabbi Akiva, so according to Rabbi Akiva, what does he do with this pasuk? Since according to Rabbi Akiva, we're saying that if something that's permitted combines with something that's prohibited to make the required amount, why do we need to say that something prohibited combines? If something that's permitted combines with the required amount, for sure something that's prohibited. The question is not really beloved by all the Rishonim, because we do know that there are some times where if two things are opposite, they're more likely to combine one if they're similar. But nevertheless, because when they're opposite, the one overwhelms the other. But that's the Gemara's question. So So if Ghana responds to Rav Ashi that heter to Easter combines, that when you have something permitted, it combines with something prohibited, that even when they eat them at the same time, they're going to combine only when they eat them at the same time. However, Easter, if there are two prohibited things, then they'll even combine if you eat them consecutively, as long as you eat them within the time it takes to eat a loaf of bread. So that's the distinction. So the Gemara says, well, according to Rabbi Shimon, says that you're liable for without any amount. Meaning, say even a small amount, you have liability for a Nazir if you eat something that's prohibited. According to Rabbi Shimon, delay, slay, tziruf, therefore he doesn't need this whole concept of combination of two different things in order to make the required amount, because he says any small amount of that you eat, you have liability. So what does he do from this pasuk? He doesn't need it to tell us that you combine two prohibited things to have liability for a Nazir, because he says no matter the amount, no matter how small, you have liability. So my darish, we're on top of Lamachas and Aleph. So Amrocha, and Rabbi Shimon would say, to teach us, Rabbi Shimon says, no, we need that pasuk to teach us that you're not a Nazirite until you take a prohibition from every aspect of Nazirus, not just from a part of the Nazirus. Amar Rabbi Avo, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Kol Raviyah Shabbatorah Ein Heter Mitzdaref L'Isur Chos MiRaviyah Shabbanazir. Shari Amar Torah Mishra. So our whole discussion began on the bottom of Lamed Hayam Beis. So Rabbi Avo, quoting Rabbi Yochanan, he says that by all the prohibitions of the Torah, we don't say heter is mitzdaref to Isur. We don't say something permitted combined with something prohibited, except for by Nazir. This is a variation of that statement. In this statement, Rabbi Avo says it in the name of Rabbi Lazar, and he says it's more specific. He says all the revios shebetorah. A revius is a quarter lug of a liquid, a volume, and so we're saying that all of the revios do not combine to make a prohibited amount, except for by Nazir. But I was also thinking about, there's another way to understand this. What about Revi'ah Shabbatorah? Do we say heter mitzdaref to heter? Can you combine, let's say, like dilute the item do we say he's saying ein heter mitzdaref for Easter, but I was asking a different question. By reviewers, can you say that the heter is mitzdaref for heter? But the Gemara doesn't say that. So, except for by the revius of Nazir, there the Torah says mishras. The word mishras is to teach us that the heter is mitzdaref to the prohibition, as we've been discussing the last couple of days. So the Gemara says, well, Rabbi Avo cites Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar. So Ma'ika be Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar. There's quotations sound very similar. So what's the difference between them? Ika b'na'al, the Rabbi Yochanan mar b'yafilu ochan. That Rabbi Yochanan is even more expansive when it comes to Nazir. He's saying even by solids, we're going to say that the heter is mitzdaref to the Easter. Rabbi Lazar mashkin in midiyachrinu. Rabbi Lazar says it's only mixed together by liquids, but not by solids. By liquids, you could see it's more mixed, it's more mixable, and so therefore he's going to say by liquids, we'll say that the heter is mitzdaref because they really become one entity, but not by the solids. Rabbi Lazar, so now Rabbi Lazar says, Esther Reviosain. There are 10 revios. Revios is this quarter lug, and we're going to say that there are 10 areas where we say that this revius is relevant. V'nakim Rav Kahana b'yadei. Rav Kahana had to do a siman to remember them, so he held in his hand chamesh sumakta v'chamesh chivarta. 5 of them are red and 5 of them are white. The red refers to blood and wine, and the white refers to clear liquids. What are the chamesh sumakta? What are the 5? And there's a mnemonic. The mnemonic is like a little story. It's a Nazir v'osa Pesach. The Nazir was going along to make a Pesach. Shahora b'mikdash, and he gave halacha in the temple mesu, and then he died. So how is this related to revius? And we'll break down the mnemonic. Nazir refers to revius yayin Nazir. That a Nazir is in violation of the sin, gets lashes if he drinks a revius of wine. Osa Pesach. What is that? That refers to Dam Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. The 4 cups of wine, you have to drink a revius. For each of the cups has to be in a revius of wine, a quarter lug of wine, in order to fulfill the obligation of the 4 cups. And we said yesterday that what's the source that we need to drink 4 cups of wine? So the Yerushalmi in Pesachim, chapter 10 al-Chaf, brings 4 reasons. One is that it's based upon the 4 verses of redemption, 4 expressions of redemption in Exodus chapter 6, verse 6 and 7. A second explanation is it refers to the 4 kos. The 4 times the word kos refers to the cup of Paro in Genesis chapter 40, verse 11 and 13, when Joseph is interpreting the dream of the Sarah Mashkin. The third is it refers to the 4 nations of the world that will subjugate the Jewish people, the Median, the Kasdian, the Yavanim, and the Edomim. And the 4 refers to the 4 cups of punishment that God will give to the nations of the world to force them to drink as a punishment for the way they acted. So we see from here that requires a revius for the 4 cups of Pesach. What's shahoru? Shata revius yayin al yorba mikdash. If a person drinks a quarter lug of wine, he's not allowed to enter into the temple. Shasa revius yayin v'nechnas l'mikdash chayiv misa. And if you drink a revius of wine and you enter into the temple, you're liable for death. So the one is that if you drink a revius of wine, you can't paskin a shayla, you can't give a halachic ruling. And the second is that if you enter into the temple, you're liable for death and you serve in the temple after you drink a revius of wine. So, and what's the case of death? Titania minayil revius dam sheyotze mishnei mesim. I don't know if there's a quarter lug of blood that comes out from 2 dead bodies that combines to make a quarter lug that it's going to be able to be considered like enough of a dead body that it will transmit tumah in the tent. As it states, the combination of souls with death, you can't come. So we see from here, these are the 5 red revios. 2 of them are telling us that you're not allowed to drink the wine. Actually 3. 3 tell us you're not allowed to drink the wine. But one is because you took a vow, but the other is because you can't drink wine before you give halachic ruling. When you can't drink the wine before you serve in the temple. And the other is telling us that you have to drink the wine in order to gain spirituality. that is for the Pesach as part of the cups of redemption. So, excuse me, we see from here that wine is a dangerous tool. It can be used to enhance our spiritual lives, or it can be used to detract from our spiritual lives. And so therefore we have to be incredibly careful. Now, what is the chamesh chivarta? What are the 5 white areas, 5 white liquids? Chalos, and then here too there's a mnemonic. Chalos Nazir, umitzora shenifsalu b'Shabbos. The chalos of the Nazir and the mitzora became disqualified on Shabbos. What's chalos? That's revi'as shemen lachala. So Tosfos explains that this refers to the quarter lug of oil that was necessary for the Thanksgiving offering. Tosfos says that we referred to, there were 3 types of loaves. There was 40 loaves of bread that were brought for the Thanksgiving offering. Everybody would eat it together as a big meal. And 10 of those loaves were chametz. Remove those loaves from the equation. Then there were another 3 different types of loaves. Each one was 10. And this was the 10 of the revuchin, the 10 of the rekikin. And they required a half a lug of oil. And also there is, and so let's just say this again, there were 10 for the revuchin and 10 for the rekikin, and they each required a half a lug. And they said, and Tosfos says, you're supposed to have half of that, half a lug for the rekikin, chalos, and half for the revucha. So that's a quarter lug for each of them. And then the next area was revi'as shem. Well, the Mefarsh gives a different explanation. What's the Mefarsh's explanation? The Mefarsh says, so the Mefarsh says the 5 for the white. Simano girsa chalos nazir mitzvah shenim selushatz. Chalos revi'as shem lachala, and he says that's like we said in Masechas Menachos. Yosef Rabbi Kakash revi'as b'mikdash lama nimshacha. So Rabbi Chia responds, it's for the chavitim of the Kohen Gadol, the mevi b'chol yom, that it's required for the offering that the Kohen Gadol had to bring every single day. So that's what the Mefarsh says it's required for. Then we said revi'as shemen lechalos nazir, that the nazir has to bring 2 loaves of 2 types of loaves, the rekikin and the chalos, and so therefore that requires a quarter lug of oil. And then the next one is mitzora. The mitzora requires revi'as mayim mitzora, so that if there was a person who became a mitzora, you needed to sprinkle some of the mayim chayim that was mixed with the blood of the bird and the hyssop and the cedar and the crimson thread. He needs to sprinkle that on him, and that water has to have a revi'as of water. That was required a revi'as of the mayim chayim. And shenifslu the tanam b'shar kol mashkin tmeim posam es akvia b'revi'as, and that if the Kohen would drink from the mayim, the water from all the other liquids, not the water, from all the other liquids, he becomes tamei if he drinks a quarter lug of it. And then on Shabbos, that if you carry out certain liquids, you're going to be liable on Shabbos for carrying out a revi'as, and charcoal shoflim revi'as, and also those waters that were supposed to be spilled out because they were dirty, that are also you're liable for a revi'as. V'suleika, are those all the cases? What about the concept that you wash your hands in order to do netilas yadayim? It needs to be a cup that holds revi'as of water for one hand, and then you could use it for 2 hands. So the Gemara says, well, that's actually a dispute in the Mishnah and Yadayim, but putulo kamarin, since it's a dispute, we're not talking about cases where there's a dispute by the white wine, by the white liquids, by the reds. That obviously the case of the Nazir was a dispute because we saw in our Mishnah there was a dispute if it was a revi'as or a kazayas. That's what Tosfos points out. Maybe but what about the case of the fact that with the sota, it says that you're supposed to bring a cup of pottery, a clay, and put into it a half lug of water from the basin. Rabbi Yehuda Omer revi'as. Rabbi Yehuda says revi'as. Gemara says again, that's another dispute. We're not referring to that. And what about the case? How much water do you have to put into a utensil that had urine in it in order to, so to speak, clean it so you could pray in front of it? Rabbi Zakkai says, so Revius. So the Gemara says, that's also first approach is a kosher. Rabbi Zakkai says Revius. So the Gemara says, that's also a dispute in Bepukto Kamari. We're not referring to cases of a dispute. The Gemara says, Vayika mikvah. What about the case of a mikvah that we're talking about immersing utensils that were tamei, not to be kosher for not to be less count for the mitzvah of immersing utensil in the mikvah before using it. But this is a utensil that become ritually impure. That biblically speaking, you could put it in a revius if it would be a needle. A small utensil. So Gemara says, let's exclude that case because the rabbis said, no, you need mem saw even for that case. You need a full-size mikvah even for those utensils. So now we turn to Lamachas Amabeis. Our Mishnah had said, our Mishnah had said, you're only going to be liable if you eat from the grapes an owl-size amount. So whereas then the Mishnah Rishona said no revius. So Tanakama, the Tanakama, we take out the word low. Medami lahon l'kol isuri nazir l'shtiya. The Tanakama, which we said as the Mishnah Rishona, that says that you need revius because he compares all the prohibitions of Nazir to drinking, and just like drinking wine is generally speaking a revius, like we said. So too, the prohibition of eating the grapes is going to be a revius. Whereas Rabbi Akiva, who says it's a kazayis, since it says the grapes, the fresh and the dry, you cannot eat. He says, Rabbi Akiva says all the prohibitions are an off-size amount. And then the Mishnah said you're liable for the wine on its own and also the seeds on their own and also the skin on their own. Tan Rabbanan, it says the grapes, the fresh and the dry, you cannot eat. It teaches us you're liable for each one on its own. And from here we're going to learn out a general rule for all the prohibitions of the Torah. Just like over here, it's one real entity. They both come from a grape originally. And one is called a grape, one's called a raisin. And if you eat it, you're going to be liable for eating for two separate prohibitions. So to anything which is really one essence, but it's two names, you're going to be liable for each one on their own. This comes to include the case of the new wine, i.e. grape juice, and inve. If you eat grape juice, drink grape juice, and eat the grapes, you're going to be liable for two prohibitions. So Amar Abaye Achal Chartzam Loka Shtayim, that Abaye says if you eat the seeds, you're going to get two ashes. Achal Zag Loka Shtayim. Abaye says just a general rule that if you eat the seeds of if a Nazir eats the seeds of the grapes or the skin of the grapes, he's going to get two ashes. Achal Chartzam V'Zug Loka Shlosh. If you eat the seeds and the skin, you're going to get three lashes. Rava Amar, three sets. Rava Amar Eino Loka Ela Achas. Rava says you're going to get one set of lashes. She'eino Loka Ela Alav Shebacholos. Because what's the reason why Abaye is saying you get two lashes? One is for the prohibition against eating the seeds or the skin, and one is because there's a general prohibition that anything that comes from the wine that you can't eat. So that's why Abaye is saying you get two sets of lashes. But Rava is saying no, that this is what's called a lav shebacholos. It's a prohibition that includes many categories, many things in it, and multiple things. And so therefore Rava says you don't get lashes on a lav shebacholos. It's too general, and therefore you're not going to get lashes. So that's a dispute between Abaye, who says you would get lashes on the lav shebacholos, and Rava says you don't. So Masav Rav Papa challenges Abaye, because the Brisa says Rabbi Elazar says Nazir shayashota yain kol yom ve'eino chayav el achas. Let's say there's a Nazirite who is drinking wine the whole day. He's only going to be liable one time. Amru al tishta mu'shota. But let's say they tell him multiple times not to drink. Then chayav kol achas v'achas is going to be liable for each time he drinks. Let's say he ate the grapes, the fresh and the dry, the grapes and the raisins, the chartzanim v'zagim, the seeds and the skin, v'sachat eshkol shalim, or he squeezed out a cluster of grapes for shot and he drank the revius. Lo kechamesh, he's going to be liable for 5 sets of lashes. So, and now so says Rav Papa Tabai, according to you, says he's going to get also a set of lashes for the lav shebechol, for the general prohibition. Yachi lo sheish. Achas al mikol asher yaseh. Let him also get a 6 set of lashes, one for this general prohibition that mikol asher yaseh migef nayayin lo yochal, and anything that comes from mikol asher yaseh migef nayayin lo yochal, anything that comes from the grapevine you cannot eat. So the Gemara says, Tana v'shir, that Abaye would answer to our Papa that the Brisa left something out. The Brisa wasn't including all the sets of lashes. It left out some set of lashes. It left out at least one other thing. Whenever we say Tana v'shir, you can't just say he left that out. He has to say what else he left out. My shir, die shir. What else did it leave out? So the answer is shir lo yachel dvaro. He left out the prohibition that he can't violate his vow. Nazir, by drinking wine, is not just violating the prohibition of drinking wine, he's also violating his vow. So the Gemara says, no, if that's the case, that would not be that can't be what the Bryce left over, because that's not considered a shira, that's not considered something that he left over. Why? That because the Bryce is listing those things that don't appear in any other place. Lo yachel dvaro, isei b'nedarim, but lo yachel dvaro is something that appears by all vows, and so therefore the Tana wouldn't list this vow here. But the fact that he doesn't list those things that relate to wine, that's a question against Abaye. So so what else did he leave out? So therefore you can't say that that's what he left out. So says Ravina. Mi Parskaya or Ravashi Bashir Dibena Binayim. I'll tell you what else he left out. He left out the prohibition of eating the pulp, the pulp of the grapes. That's called the Bena Binayim. So he did leave something else. So you can't ask a question to Abaye from this case. So Rav Papa seems to be rejected. So Elam Rav Papa lo Tanya Midei Chamesh. So Rav Papa says, okay, you know what? Don't say in the Brisa, he didn't really say that you get 5 sets of lashes. It just said you get lashes. And according to Abaye, you could say that he also got lashes for Kol Asher Yasam Gefen Hayayin. Rav Papa is moda on this. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, Vaha Osve, that was exactly Rav Papa's question. Rav Papa is admitting that there was that it doesn't say 5, but that was your question. Your question what against Abaye was Vaha Osve Chamesh. That's how you challenge him. Well, if it doesn't say chamesh, if it doesn't say 5, then why was Rav Papa raising this question? So Rav Papa says, Rav Papa, I didn't realize, Rav Papa says, I didn't realize that Abaye had a tradition. I thought he didn't have a tradition. I thought he was just basically making this argument through his own analysis. So therefore, I raised the Bryce at him, thinking that I could catch him there. There's a tradition against him. I thought he would recant when I showed him a Bryce. And I didn't realize that he had a tradition, and that's why he wasn't going to recant. Meaning to say that lakach, but DC Malibi, Tosu says that Rav Papa said, I made this up on my own. Mosafti Awashim on Bryce. I added on to the language of the Bryce Chamesh. I added on this word which wasn't there. And that's why I was challenging Abaye. Or os imidato amra. I wanted to see if he said this on his own. If he was saying this on his own. Because then he'll quickly recant when he sees a Bryce. And if he saw a Brisa against his own analysis, he'll quickly change his mind. I didn't realize he had a tradition. And that's how and that's why he didn't change his mind. And that's how I was able to check whether it was a real tradition. So we see from here that Rav Papa actually made up a scenario, changed the text just to test whether or not Abaye was how to what extent the Abai was giving his position. Was it based on his own logic or was it on a tradition? Very interesting approach that you can forge a source to see what the real sugya is saying. And back to the Gemara that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said that you're only liable if you eat two seeds in one skin, or we can understand that this is a debate. What is the chartzan? Is the chartzan the skin, or is the chartzan the seed? So the Tanakam that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says the chartzanim is the skin and the zagim is the seed. That's Rabbi Yehuda's position. Rabbi Yossi says, don't make a mistake. It's like a bell. The chitzon is the skin, and the panimi part is the chitzon is the zagim. The zagim is the skin, and the panimi is the inbal, and the inner part is the seed. So according to Rabbi Yossi, the skin are the chartzanim, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, the skin is the chartzanim, and according to Rabbi Yossi, the chartzanim are the seeds. And so the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yosef, Kamam Targamina, like whom do we translate that which is written with respect to the prohibition of eating the grapes of the Nazir, eating the grapes, and the Targum says, Mi portzanin ba'adi tzuran. So this is like Rabbi Yossi, who says that the chartzanim are the seeds and the zagim are the skin, because the translation of chartzanim is portzin, which is the seeds. Okay, we'll stop here. Everybody should have an amazing day. If you have questions, I'll be happy to address.